All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this third day, the final day of this year's Claremont Eco Forum, which is actually our 5th International Youth Forum on Ecological Civilization. So today we have 2 sessions, 2 panel discussions featuring young voices, young leaders, thinking about the topic of our event, which is deep transformation for ecological civilization. And that comes about in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different aspects and elements and features of transformation, and we're excited to hear what our panelists have to say about that topic today. Before we get started, I have a little video to share with us, introducing the history of our Eco Forum, giving us some context of how we got to where we are, to set the stage for today's conversation. And then I'll hand it over to Dr. Jay McDaniel, who will be moderating this discussion. No, he does not qualify to serve as a young voice on the panel, but he is young at heart, which makes him a perfect wise mediator for such a discussion. And after our panel, then we'll actually transition into a wonderful musical piece by one of our Korean partners, and then a short break before we come back for a deeper conversation as an entire group. That's the plan. So with no further ado. Oh, wait. I don't think I hit the right button. You got to remember to hit the share sound button if you're going to try to share sound.
Welcome to the 16th Claremont International Forum on Ecological Civilization and the 5th Youth Forum on Ecological Civilization. The Claremont Eco Forum is a prestigious annual event that began in 2006. It stands as the earliest and largest forum dedicated to ecological civilization in the Western world. Our mission is to gather innovative academics, nonprofit leaders, prominent activists, and governmental officials from both China and other nations. Together, we aim to explore new worldviews, modes of thinking, developmental models, approaches to organic farming, and educational paradigms in the pursuit of transitioning towards an ecological civilization. Over the years, thousands of individuals from around the globe have participated in these forums, fostering a significant impact. Media's coverage, such as People's Daily, Xinhua News, International Daily, and Snow U.S. Times, has helped to disseminate the forum's objectives. Notably, the 15th Claremont Eco Forum in 2022 reached approximately 12 million views, particularly in China, through various traditional and social media channels. The Claremont Eco Forum was initially organized by the Institute for Postmodern Development of China, IPDC, and the Center for Process Studies, CPS. In recent years, it has gradually received co-sponsorship from esteemed organizations such as the Cobb Institute, CI, the Institute for Ecological Civilization, EcoCiv, the China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development Foundation, the Budapest Center for Long-Term Sustainability, Hungary, the Overseas Chinese Environmental Engineers and Scientists Association, and the Chinese Ecological Civilization, Research and Promotion Association, among others. We extend a warm welcome to all participants and hope you thoroughly enjoy the forum. May the 16th Claremont Ecological Forum be a resounding success.
That's such a great video. Whoever is the narrator for that speaks so clearly. It's really impressive. So that's sort of our past, coming up to the present. One of the things about sort of our current situation as a global society in these communities, obviously we're facing some major challenges environmental challenges, social inequalities and injustices. And we believe, as the Claremont Eco Forum, that these are not separate problems, but they're all intertwined, interconnected problems, part of a complex web of crises that are that can really only be addressed through a real deep transformation. And that's why we chose that as the theme for this year's conversation. Band-aid solutions is not enough. Addressing symptoms of these problems is not enough. You can't just say, let's plant a couple trees and establish a carbon tax. That's not going to fix the root problem, which goes much, much deeper. So this year's forum has really been exploring what those sort of different aspects of a deeper transformation would look like, including paradigm shifts, worldview change, value change, changing the way that we understand the world and our place in it, as well as changing the very structures and the systems that on which our societies are organized, our economic structures, alternatives to capitalism, right? So all of these sorts of things are bundled up into the kinds of stuff that we've been exploring the last couple of days on what we mean by a deep transformation toward an ecological civilization, which is a phrase that we use to effectively mean a radically different kind of way of humans living on this planet, where societies are organized according to ecological principles, and right, we have a more sustainable, equitable way of being. Good things, right? It's what everybody wants. So with that, I'm excited to see what our youth panel has to say for us today. Dr. Jay McDaniel, retired professor of religion from Hendrix College, Arkansas, an expert in process theology, ecology, especially religion and ecology, but not exclusively. Was been actually a leading voice in the religion and ecology movement for many years. Just the other day, the head of creation care from the Vatican says, "Oh, Dr. McDaniel, I've read your books. They're very good and informative for me." So, you know, the Pope's right-hand man is reading Jay. So who knows how far his influence extends. But we are grateful to have him here as part of our organizing body and our moderator for today. Jay, you're in charge now. I'll stop talking.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Andrew. And hello to everybody. A special hello to John Cobb. John got so many of us started and has inspired so much in us. He comes from the future as well as the past, because he's a guiding light as we move toward the future. We feel his call and his presence. And to everybody here, Andrew noted that I'm not a youth. And I think that's true, but we can be young at heart. And I think I've got a bit of that in me, but admittedly, chronologically, I don't think I qualify as a youth. So the one question we have is, well, what in the world is a youth? And what is the age level? And I just want you to know that our parameters are very wide. 18 to 42. And if you happen to be in those parameters, you're fine. And if you're not, just don't tell us and we'll never know. So all will be well. I'm going to follow a model that I saw the other day with Philip Clayton. And what Philip Clayton did with one of his panels was to ask a sequence of questions and ask the panelists to offer kind of brief responses to each one. And then after that, the panelists can be in conversation with one another, but we will be moving fairly precipitously. And I've given the panelists the questions in advance, so I'd like for you to see them too. Here they are. What hopes for the world do you bring to this discussion? What do you try to do to help these hopes become a reality? Does the phrase ecological civilization offer a general name, a rubric for these hopes? How do you think about ecological civilization? Is it primarily about the more than human world and our relations to it? Or does it include caring relations between people? Does it include social justice, creativity, spirituality, music, and the arts? What experiences have led you to be interested in EcoCiv? We'd actually like to know what got you started. How did it begin? And when? 4, what do you think are the primary obstacles to EcoCiv today? Is it ways of thinking, ways of feeling, economic systems, forms of governance, all of the above, none of the above? 5, are there organizations and philosophies to which you turn, which you find helpful in helping bring about a better world? What are they? We'd like to learn from them too. 6, people interested in EcoCiv focus on the global and the local. Some speak of creative localization as the place where they come together. Are there things that you're doing in your own local community that embody localization? And what have you learned along the way? We want to learn from you. 7, how important are digital technologies to the world's future? Some speak of the world's future as one in which humans better partner with machines for the common good. What do you think? And if you want to go this route, any thoughts about AI? 8, how important to you is multi-generational learning, by which people from different generations learn together? I think I have vested interests in that question. 9, which do you emphasize more? Systemic philosophical changes, systemic economic changes, systemic cultural changes, local community changes, lifestyle changes, spiritual changes, and if you had to prioritize them, if you had to, how would you do it? 10, what questions do you wish you'd asked that you weren't asked? So Andrew, you can put that down now and we'll get started. I think the first thing before we jump into the questions is to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. Corinne, you're on my screen first, so I'll ask you to do that. Would you get us started?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm Corinne. I'm based in Seattle. I'm officially a second-year PhD student at the Claremont School of Theology now. I'm earning a PhD in philosophy of religion with a focus in process studies. I also work managing a large research project with Cal State Northridge. The research is in the Department of Religious Studies, but it's specifically in cognitive science of religion, and our research is looking at how people reason about loss, and it's really broad. So the issue of the existential nature of climate catastrophe is part of that, under that umbrella of grief and how people are coping with that. So let's see, other than that, my personal philosophy, I would, and political affiliation, I'll just like put it out there right now because it's going to come up. I identify as a Marxist. And so that's both a philosophy and a politics. And I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Corinne. Appreciate that. Celeste, you're next on my screen. I'm just going across my screen. Celeste, you're next.
Hello, I'm Celeste. I am currently based in Escazú, which is a suburb of San Jose in Costa Rica. My day job is I teach at the branch of Texas Tech University that's here in Escazú. And my story is that I'm I guess, integral and process philosopher of physics and also a theoretical physicist. Most of my training is in theoretical physics proper, but I did that, and I think we'll get to this later, but I decided to become a physicist because I think I was trying to get to these basic issues of how the universe works, but physics only goes so far enough, so I really want to get to process theory and philosophy and metaphysics, and so I'm both a physicist and a metaphysicist, I guess. But I don't just want to stop at physics. I want to have a holistic process, integral cosmology that incorporates not just science, but also philosophy and religion and culture and everything. So physicists often talk about theories of everything, but I want a theory of everything. And at the moment, I spend my time teaching this as much as possible to undergraduates, mostly first and second year undergraduates in engineering and business at the campus here, because that's what the focus is. But really, my life, I've dedicated my life basically to furthering process and integral education from both a physics standpoint, but really a holistic philosophical standpoint as well. And that necessarily leads into all of the ecological civilization things that we'll be talking about today. I could say more, but maybe that's a good place to stop.
That's great, Celeste. Thank you so much. Raj, you're next.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jay. So I'm really happy to be invited onto this panel and to meet such esteemed other speakers. So yeah, my name is Raj. I'm originally Indian, but I grew up in Switzerland. I'm currently based in London. That's where I'm dialing in from. I have a background in economics, but I'm currently studying public health. And I also work for a pharmaceutical company called Novartis, where most of my work focuses on global health and sustainability. And I also happen to sort of, on a slightly more religious, philosophical side, I happen to be a member of the Jain community. So you may have come across Jainism as a religion or a faith. And so I feel like I can almost wear a couple hats here in terms of talking about the ecology and environmental sustainability from a slightly more philosophical angle in terms of Jainism and some of the sort of values and behaviors that I was brought up with, but equally a bit more from a business angle in terms of the work that I do on a day-to-day basis. So no, really looking forward to exploring some of these topics with all of you.
Thank you, Raj. Oliver, you're next.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm Oliver. I'm 26, French-German. I moved a lot in my life. I decided to approximately move twice per year. So I moved around 20 times in my life, a little bit everywhere across Europe. I'm really super interested to meet people. I've grown a lot into nature. So ever since that, I'm super interested in ecology, applied in psychology, and sustainability as more management, economic policies and stuff. So I graduated a master's in behavioral economics and sustainability management. I'm working on the side as an art director. I created a collective of Eye Opener, where we are trying to travel the world with an installation that actually tackles a lot of the topics that you just mentioned with the list. So that makes me very happy. I'm working for money because it's always hard to match the purpose and the needs of life for market analysis, so market research, but on an emphasis on sustainability. So at least I have that. Yeah, and I'm a lot into research as well, because I'm trying to publish a paper now on sustainability transfer, which is the activity of university to actually implement sustainability ideas in the outside world and not just talk about academic stuff that nobody understands.
Oliver, thanks so much. Jared, you're last on the list.
Alrighty. Assalamu alaikum, ni hao. I'm Jared. Happy to be here with all my esteemed youth presenters. I'm working for the Center for Process Studies and the Kaaba Institute, as well as some organizations in the psychedelic medicine space. And very much drawing on process, philosophy, and theology in my intellectual constellation of eclectic sources, but also Islam, Sufism. These traditions are a major source for me as well, and that is sort of the personal practice that that I follow. But very sort of poly-religious. I'm bringing in Christian theologies, Buddhist philosophies, seeing how these things can play together and help create a new sort of sacred ecological vision Other frameworks that are helpful there for me are sort of integral theory, metamodernism, these sorts of developing philosophies and frameworks. So bringing a lot of disparate elements, but hopefully it can all mesh together in the service of some more ecological thinking and living.
Thanks, Jared. We'll jump into the first question, and I may collapse the two. The first is, what hopes do you bring, what hopes for the world do you bring to this discussion? What do you do yourself to help have those hopes realized? And does the phrase ecological civilization function for you as a rubric, a framework by which to understand those hopes? And there's no right answer. We're really just curious if that phrase has legs, if it has traction. Related to that is the second question. If ecological civilization does work for you, do you understand it primarily as about human-environment relations? Or do you understand it as also including human-to-human relations? What's your image of an ecological civilization? All right, so that's bringing the first two questions together. Who wants to get started? Anybody want to get started on that one? I can just go in the order that you just introduced yourself. Corinne, you want to get started?
Sure. The hope, my hope, I would like to see working class solidarity internationally. That's kind of my greatest hope. I think we need that. We need that on the basis of environment and anti-imperialism and to move away from capitalism, which is so globally entrenched. We need this to be international. And so I find hope in seeing all of the integration that the Center for Process Studies has done in China. The bridging Whitehead and Marx brings me personally a lot of hope. And I actually have been thinking about I've been thinking about the phrase ecological civilization for a little while now, because I just took a class with Dr. Schwartz and talked about it a lot. And I can't think of a better phrase really to give the biggest umbrella for what the shared goals that we have and what's and to motivate people, because the word civilization is it means the most advanced, like, society, the organization of a society, the most advanced. And I think it's really compelling for a lot of people who look around and they're like, no, this is not it. This is not the best we can do. And of course, historically, it's been a problematic word, because the second we define ourselves as civilized, when we're actually not, then we run into problems. And then ecological just versus environmental, for me, the connotation of ecological is that humans are part of the equation and our social relations are part of the equation, not just our external environment. So yeah, I'll hand it off.
All right, we'll hand it off to Celeste. Celeste, you want to add something to that, or?
Yeah, I was just thinking, when we think civilization, we tend to think about just humans, right? And so I think maybe civilization doesn't go far enough. Of course, we need to have a global ecological civilization that unites everyone on the planet working towards the advancement of not just humanity, but also just life on Earth generally. But that's the point. I think when we say civilization, it doesn't necessarily include all the rest of the biosphere. So maybe there should be some better word. But I mean, civilization, as far as it goes, is good. But yeah, I was just thinking maybe there's a broader term even that we can find. And again, same thing with ecological. Ecological is about communities and relationships, and ultimately we want to have relationships of relationships, and maybe ecological doesn't go far enough either. So I think the phrase is good, but maybe we can push it even further.
Okay.
But I definitely am. I'm on board with the project as it is, and I want to keep pushing and expanding. And like we were saying, right, we want to try to find this best holistic worldview that incorporates all of reality into one holistic process, and for the advancement of all of the Earth community, and not even just the Earth, of course. We're on Earth, and so we're most concerned about Earth, but we really need to have not just an Earth-based perspective, but really a cosmic perspective even beyond that.
All right, Celeste, thank you. Raj.
Yes, I think the way I look at it is, as humans, we all have some kind of moral responsibility to focus on the most pressing issues around us. And so naturally, when it comes to the ecological crisis, and when we talk about ecological civilization, everyone today on this call, everyone in the world has some form of vested interest in this topic, whether you're a policymaker, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a student, whether you're just someone who's interested in the environment for other reasons. I think everyone has some kind of vested interest. And so the big thing is about working out how every day you on a personal individual level can make small steps to make your own unique contribution to that. And so when I think about my own situation personally, I try and think about how I can maybe embody Jain values, how I can try and spread those Jain values, not necessarily in a preachy way, but more as offering an alternative solution or another way of thinking that people might want to take on. I think Corinne obviously spoke about capitalism and some of the challenges that this model has. I like to also look at it in a sort of pragmatic, realistic way, where we're stuck in a capitalist system, but how can we still try and mold that system? How can we still try and find solutions within this capitalist model to still ensure that we make small, tangible progress every day? And so then linking back to sort of the work that I do, obviously I work for a multinational corporation, but my sort of goal every day, my philosophy that I go in with is how can I still try and ensure that the work that we're doing within this company can still ultimately create some kind of positive impact for the environment and for ecology at large. So that's kind of how I approach that topic.
Thank you, Raj. Oliver.
Yeah, I totally agreed with the three last speakers. So until now we had capitalism, cosmic perspective, and pragmatic approach, if I can summarize it all. And I really agree on all of them. But I really like the point of Raj. We need to be pragmatic. Although it's true, the term ecological civilization, I'm not very familiar to it. I had to read about it before participating to the event. To me, the distinction nature civilization is more, I've heard more of nature culture. I prefer that distinction actually. And I think it's a little bit linked to what Raj said, because it's more pragmatic. We're stuck in the system. Okay, it's been 20, 30 years. We're saying we're in post-capitalism, and now it's for sure we're done with it. We saw all of the mistakes we did, but it's still not the case. We're still fighting with so many problems. So to see it from a more pragmatic approach, seeing it as more, we have a culture and it needs to fit just facts. How does biodiversity works? What are the planetary boundaries? What does infinite economic growth mean on the finite planets? All of this stuff. So I just wanted to add on that. Cosmic perspective is nice. I really like all this, because if you learn more about the space, you see how small we are in terms of size, but also in terms of time scales. But at the same time, we're not there yet. I feel like Celeste, unfortunately, we're still at the very basics. So even if it's cool to create some concepts about the cosmic perspective of ecology, I think that would be rather only relevant for 1% of the world, if you see what I mean.
Oliver, you want to say a word about the work you're doing in the arts, just to add that into the hopper?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very dense questions every time. What do you do about towards ecological civilization? So that installation is about intergenerational judgments and what is the role of empathy to bring more coherence towards the generations. I mean, we all know sustainability is like a tricky concept because we cannot define it. But there is one definition that emphasizes on the role of generations, our responsibility to work towards the well-being of future generations. And I want to bring together young people, old people, and the installation itself is a metaphor of each installation is a generation, and each group in the installation will have to judge the previous generations without knowing that they will be judged as well. Which is kind of all the Greta movement. Super easy to judge the last generations, but is what you're doing actually super pragmatically efficient? So yeah, in 2 words, that's it, but maybe we can talk about it later.
Okay, thank you. Jared.
All right, here's the vision. We need coherent pluralism bounded by ecological concern. So a lot of our contemporary approach to pluralism just throws the gates wide open. Anything goes, very relativistic. There isn't a normativity. Ecological constraints can provide that normativity while also giving a lot of room for creative exploration and diversity within those bounds. So some forms of ecological civilization may look like the Amish, some may look like a hippie commune, some may look like a workers collective. So there's urban and rural and all sorts of in-between ways that we can make this work. And getting those different experiments interlinked with one another so they can support and contribute and knowledge share and get in this dialectical relationship is definitely the way I envision moving towards ecological civilization. And a note on the term, it's very interesting that both the English term ecology and economy come from the same Greek word oikos, which relates to the house or the family. So there is a potential to sort of return to some sort of integration between these two sides of something, and maybe playing with that oikos term could be another sort of attractor like ecological civilization.
All right, Jared. And Jared, in terms of the question, what do you do to help bring about that pluralistic harmony that you talked about? Can you say just a word about the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm doing a lot of sort of dialogue and sort of intellectual kind of work, trying to get religious wisdom brought up into more contemporary spaces, be able to sort of mine some ecological perspectives from that, but then also figuring out how to help these communities better relate with one another. If we're stuck in sort of religious exclusivist infighting, it's going to be really hard to collaborate or even put our attention towards these pressing ecological matters. So that's where my focus.
Okay. Now the next question is to invite you to be a little personal. Not overly personal, just as personal as you want to be. But what experiences did you have early in your life or whenever that led you to care about what you now care about? So let's say you care about ecological civilization. Let's say you care about international workers movement. Let's say you care about being pragmatic. And making a local difference as best you can in the context in which you're situated. How did that happen? What did you experience that led you to be concerned for that in the first place? Can you just give us a sense of what the catalyst was experientially? Corinne?
For me, I'm not going to go too far back. I'll go back to when I started my undergrad at the University of Washington, and the book that they wanted all incoming freshmen to read was called Field Notes to a Catastrophe. And it was, and I read it, and it was alarming, eye-opening. I didn't know the nature of the crisis. And of course, the book says, all the scientists say we don't have much time at all. And so then I go through my undergrad career, and I'm motivated to change the world. and I go into engineering actually initially, thinking that's how I would do that. But then I was really alienated, disillusioned, heartbroken when I saw that really the engineering departments at this big public school that's pretty well known, they were all really geared towards creating what capital wanted, what was in the state's military interests. And so it became clear that the things I would be working on and the companies that would be recruiting us to work for them, they weren't doing anything to change the world. Or at least I wasn't seeing the ones who were. And so it was just that kind of rupture in that such a short span of time of like, whoa, here's a huge existential problem. Maybe I can do something about it. And then kind of feeling just helpless. So then I radicalized politically.
Thanks, Corinne.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, just so this doesn't become totally algorithmic or predictable, I'm going to go in a different order just to keep us on our toes. Raj, how about you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for me, it's probably like a mix of experiences that have sort of led me to be interested in not just the ecological sort of civilization, but just in general, the notion of societal impact and doing the right thing and thinking really about sort of the actions that we can take to make the world a better place. So obviously mentioned that I grew up in a Jain family. And so obviously from a young age, a strong emphasis on certain values and behaviors, whether that's non-violence, being vegetarian, doing sort of trying to avoid harming others, things like that. But I sort of always looked at that as a very sort of personal thing where I wasn't too sure. Obviously for me, it was fine to do that, but I wasn't too sure what impact I could have on others and on sort of society at large. But it's more just through sort of my studies and actually kickstarting my career that I worked out that for me on a personal level, sort of the greatest way in which I can create an impact is by sort of trying to act as a change maker or as an advocate for sort of more responsible business and trying to push decision makers and people with power within companies to try and do the right thing. I mentioned the notion of pragmatism before. I've sort of come to the conclusion that we're in a highly capitalist system whereby corporate interests sort of dictate decision making, but it's very difficult to come up with a different model or to even switch from this model, even if there is a viable alternative. So pragmatically on a day-to-day basis, I really want to sort of work out how I can at least make the best out of the current situation that we're in.
So Raj, would you say, was it your religious training then or the cultural religious context in which you grew up that was a primary catalyst for you?
I would say it's a mix of both, but the catalyst is definitely the religious context. But it's one thing to sort of grow up with a certain way of thinking and certain beliefs, but it's another to sort of then have that light bulb moment where you actually start to sort of think about how you can act upon those certain values and things. And so it's only in the last few years as I've started sort of working and thinking more about these topics on a day-to-day basis that I've really sort of become more passionate about it.
Thanks. Got it. Celeste.
Okay, so I have a kind of an interesting story. I actually grew up on a farm in Eco Village in southern Ohio, and my father, who's actually here, was the one, I think, that he started this back in the 80s, and so it also came from a Quaker tradition, and Quakers traditionally have been very much into social justice activism. The joke is that Quakers are the religious society of professors and social workers. But yeah, so I came to these ideas, I think, pretty early. And I think when I was 8, I was gifted a couple of things. One was a book on physics, which sort of inspired my interest in physics, which then I pursued to the limits of physics and beyond. But also, I was given experience, again, by my father, by the work of people like Brian Swimme and Thomas Berry, who are very much into integral theory and holistic process cosmology. And so I got that very early. And so I think even at 8, I think I decided to dedicate my life to understanding the universe in its entirety, not just at the physical level, but every level of organization. But that was within the framework of an eco village and what's called the Green Fire Eco Village and Earth Regeneration Center. And so I've been basically involved in this work as long as I can remember, more or less. And then I've pursued that through academia so far, more or less successfully. I'm currently teaching as a professor, teaching physics. But my first teaching job, I was a contingent teaching faculty member, like most faculty are at this point in the US. And I realized especially that the adjunct professors at the college I was teaching at, they were making actually less than minimum wage and had not had a raise in almost 50 years. And so in that process, that I'd already become fairly radical at that point, but that really, really radicalized me. And I became a union organizer, and I actually successfully unionized the contingent faculty and got them the first raise in 50 years. Not as much as they deserve, but at least we made some progress. So,
all right, thanks, Celeste.
Yeah.
Oliver, have you always been the way you are?
It's a bit the same story as Celeste in the sense that it started with the heart rather than the brain. I also grew up in a lot of places, but I also grew up around Zurich and around Strasbourg in France. And I was really super free to go in nature every day. I was the worst at school, which changed later on, but I just spent my whole day in nature with friends, and it might sound stupid, but it's just there when I knew that it makes sense that we're part of nature. We're not different from nature, we're within it, and we're completely dependent on our environment. So that just completely made sense from my first days. And then the first big milestone was my bachelor thesis, where it was about ecosystem services and the whole question of putting value on the nature, what the nature does for us, what are the problems with that method, and then studies. But yeah, it's very simple. It started with the trees.
Okay. We've got books, trees, Quakers, and Jainism. Jared? How did Jared become Jared?
A similar constellation to what was mentioned. I definitely have a very fond memory of family experiences in northern Wisconsin in the summer at our family's cabin, and I feel like that is kind of what provided me the kind of baseline, like ecological sort of empathy. Realizing this is some really good stuff we got going on here. I think we might want to keep this around and not mess it all up. Yeah, and then all through middle school, high school, I was involved in sort of ecological sustainability student orgs. So that kind of helped me develop a bit more of an intellectual relationship with the topic and do a little bit of service work. And then in college is where these things sort of really started coalescing around some of this metaphysical, religious type work I was doing. A great class, Nature and Experience in the Religious Studies department, introduced me to a lot of these important ecological thinkers and thinking a bit more deeply and with some more nuance about some of the issues. And I've been trying to stay engaged since.
Okay. So the next question, I don't think we'll run through the series of folks here because that takes a little bit of time, but I want everybody to feel free to jump in. But let me give you the question. And if this is a question for you that elicits great passion, you go for it. And then we'll see if others want to respond to what you say. Here it is. What do you think are the primary obstacles to ecological civilization today? And I'm giving you options here. Ways of thinking, ways of feeling, economic systems, forms of governance, all of the above, none of the above. And none of the above means that question is not a very good question and you missed it entirely. All of the above is kind of the cop-out answer. Okay, yeah, everybody knows that. So it'd be nice if somebody said, no, I think this is really the obstacle, or I would prioritize this one as essential. If you don't want to do it, don't do it, but give it a try. All right. Would anybody want to come forth and say, I think this is the problem?
I'm happy to share a couple thoughts on that. So I mean, overarchingly, I think it's all of the above, but if we just say all of the above, it becomes sort of like a scattered mess where there's so many different stakeholders and so many problems. So you kind of have to think about, again, pragmatically, is there a specific group that you can target in order to try and effect change? I think a huge sort of group and sort of concept that you could look at is corporate, just basically corporations, the way the relationship works between public companies and investors, and sort of the entire notion of going after profits and things. At the moment, the biggest sort of problem is that decision-making resides with executives, with policymakers, with people in power, and that has sort of a strong correlation with where there's financial incentives and things, which makes it a very difficult area to break into and to try and effect change and have a voice. Now, my sort of solution or voice of reason is that it doesn't have to be that way forever. There's going to be a huge generational shift in wealth over the next 10 to 15 years. And I think the super important thing to bear in mind is that amongst millennials and Gen Z, there's a clear sort of interest in making a difference and really tackling these problems. And so as long as that momentum, at least from like a communications and advocacy perspective, is maintained, as long as we don't give up hope, and as long as we continue trying to find solutions and things, eventually, once sort of the economic and financial systems catch up, we'll be able to ensure that investment decisions are aligned with societal impact. Now, obviously, I know I said 10 to 15 years, and some people will argue that we have to act now, and I'm not denying that. But I think there is sort of some light at the end of the tunnel in terms of how investment decisions will shift over the next decade or so. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Now, would anybody like on the panel like to respond to Raj? Add something? Question something? Yeah.
Yeah, just to make it more clear, maybe, because you were very to the point, concrete, tangible, Jay, with the list. So I think what you mean, Raj, is it's more the economic system, because you mentioned investments, you mentioned corporations and stuff. I would actually really be interested to hear Corinne, with her Marxist perspective, complement that, if you're okay with it, Corinne, because I think you can really build up on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I also agree it's all of the above, because all these things are interconnected. But what I would say is it's in the primary instance, the economic system, and everything else is sort of secondary, and that in a dialectical sense. The capitalist mode of production requires profit, and profit requires exploitation. And that exploitation goes all the way down to literally into the soil. And when people, from a Marxist perspective, when people labor within the capitalist mode of production, and we see this practically in our lives, we have a sense of not only just alienation broadly, but precarity and false scarcity. And these things cause us, they shape the way we think and feel. And we can pigeonhole ourselves into political identities, reactionary positions. We can, it drives us apart from each other, this mode of production. So as far as like the number one barrier, what I'm trying to say is in the primary instance, it is capitalism. It's the economic system. And I want to consider myself pragmatic as well. But at what point does being pragmatic also include recognizing this fundamental problem with capitalism, and that it's not going to be in the interests of the corporations, of the financial sector, really to do what needs to be done? I'll stop there.
Raj, do you want to respond to Corinne?
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is, I think sometimes it's easy to sort of get disheartened and to think that there's some kind of rule book around how you make money, and there's only certain kinds of businesses that can make money, and therefore investors are always going to act in the same way, and ultimately the system won't change. Ultimately, value resides where what people put value into. And so if you have enough people advocating and sort of making a case for sustainability and for an ecological revolution and for good business practices and things, eventually those sort of any activities and businesses that foster those kinds of sort of values and behaviors will eventually become valuable. So that's the way I see it. It's sort of very rooted in sort of supply and demand. And if there's enough demand for a certain activity, that activity will be valuable and therefore will be in the business interest to invest into. But I recognize that there are nuances to that, and it's not as black and white as how I've just laid it out.
Now, Celeste, Oliver, Jared, you want to jump in and add your own voice?
Well, I think I agree with Corinne that economics is really important, but I think even economics as a system is rooted in our philosophies. And so I agree. I think I'm completely on board with the economics being central to how our society is organized. But even economics, I think, has a basis in what our philosophy is about how the world is structured, both in physics and metaphysics, which of course is my area of study. So yeah, I think if we have more holistic physics and metaphysics, then that naturally will lead to more holistic economic systems, and economic systems that are more just and equitable, and more concerned with things like human and ecological development and just the betterment of life on Earth generally, more than just how much profit can we squeeze out of these resources, and whether they be natural resources or human resources. Oh, it looks like Jared has something.
Jared, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll go with the cop-out answer of all of the above, but hopefully add a little flavor to it. I think these things are deeply intertwined. The sort of economic precarity that so many contemporary individuals face does not allow for time and energy to explore alternative philosophies. The existing sort of philosophical perspectives that have trickled into popular discourse are very limiting in terms of what type of phenomena you can perceive and really incorporate, and limit a person's affect in various ways. And if you're sort of depressed and dead inside because of the state of the world, your sort of range of feeling and caring is not as large as it could be otherwise. So I think a very multi-pronged approach within a sort of larger integrated vision is very helpful. And the more we can promote all sorts of different experiments in each of these domains and plug them together in creative ways, the better.
All right. Oliver, you have a
Yeah,
word
sure.
on
Maybe
this?
as a short conclusion, because you listed stuff and people didn't mention them. So you mentioned ways of thinking, ways of feeling, economic system, and forms of governance. So economic system, we talked about it, forms of governance a little bit as well, corporatism versus social states. Then we have ways of thinking and feeling. I really like these two. They're quite very broad, but I would say it's not the ways of feeling, because I mean, I'm from psychology, and you cannot say the ways of that humans feel make them worse for the other people systematically in general today like that. I don't think you can put it like that. It's more the ways of thinking that leads to other ways of feeling, like manipulation or I don't know, bad media or stuff like that that will provide bad ways of feeling. But I think it's more the ways of thinking, the rationalism of neoliberalism, the thing that Corinne mentioned. And also I really agree with Céleste that economics, I hate it when people say it's a science as a completely standalone thing. No, it's a social science. You need to put it in context. You cannot just apply economics as if you would apply physics with molecules. You need to apply it in a specific domain. And that, I think, is a little bit what we're lacking today with this corporatism, to see a more humble vision of economics in general.
Oliver, I use the word ways of feeling because it's a Whiteheadian word, a process philosophy word, but it's used in an odd way. It doesn't merely mean emotions, although those are very important in life, but it includes ways of perceiving. And so what was really behind that question was, some people would say, what we need most is a shift in worldview, how we think. And other people would say, I think equally important is a shift in perception, how we perceive. And those are not precisely the same. They influence one another, but they're not precisely the same. So if I could have reposed the question, I would put ways of perceiving rather than ways of feeling. But beneath that is the question, is the real problem how we think, that's it, or is it also how we perceive? That's also part of the problem. And if how we perceive, how can that be changed? How can that be transformed? Education, the arts, religion, that was what was behind that question. So far, I think I've got all of the above with an accent on economics, and a little bit of a debate between whether corporations are salvageable or a context in which to work, or whether they're fundamentally something to be against. That's where I'm leaving this. Now, that's my summary. We're going to move on to another topic, but if anybody wants to correct my summary, please do it now. It's fine.
Well, I guess I would just make the point that corporations or companies, they're called companies because it's a way of humans organizing themselves towards various means, right? And right now they're organized towards maximizing exploitation and profit and extraction and value. And I think we need to, if we're going to be having corporations and companies, we need to have their motives be the betterment of the Earth community and the development of civilization in the broadest sense, and not so much profit. And if they can do that in this sort of a cooperative manner, then I think they have some use. Otherwise, I'm not sure how much use they have at this point.
All right.
Yeah, maybe
That's
just
the
to jump in there, I would agree with that. I think it's the difference between sort of, there's different steps to this, but I think it has to start with this sort of change in mindset, change in thinking, because as Celeste sort of correctly pointed out, ultimately companies are just groups of people. And so if you want to change your own personal behaviors, you first focus on your beliefs and your own thinking. So why should it be any different for a company? You need a change in mindset, a change in what a company values in order to then affect that change on an economic level. So it all starts with the thinking.
Well, I guess I'm still with all of the above. I was kind of hoping for a none of the above. And there's still space for that if you want to say that. But let's move to another topic just so we make sure that we cover it. Forgive the simple way in which this is posed, but I know you can make something of it. How important are digital technologies to the world's future? Positively or negatively, or both? Some speak of the world's future as one in which humans partner with machines. I'm thinking of a theologian named Ilia Delio. And this is her phrase. And she says, actually, humans have always partnered with machines. And technologies, tools, it's not just that they're tools, they've actually been part of our identity, she would say. So nothing new. But today, people are talking about partnering with machines in such a way that human beings actually become, in some ways, post-human. It's a new kind of person. And that leads to the question of AI. And what do you see as the role of AI in the hoped for future? So that's a potpourri, a complex of issues and questions. Can you make something of that? Would you like to say something about the role of digitality in the better hopes of the world, or the worst fears of the world?
I can
Oliver?
start with just a short comment. So huge topic, we're talking about it a lot today. Are we a partner? Do we have to be a partner with machines to establish a better future and, I guess, ecological civilization? Does that make post-human? I actually, from my perspective, I'm not into digital or tech, but as an artist, I do love the new possibilities that we have with technology, and that doesn't make us less human. I think quite the contrary. If you're smart enough, if you have the right ways of feeling and thinking or perceiving, you can really find a smart solution to make people feel the right thing or make people feel stronger, good things that will make them closer to ecological civilization if you're doing it through AI or through just machines. Just a short example. So in the installation that I'm doing, there's a hidden camera and people don't know that they've been filmed and that their footage will be shown to the next generation. Exactly the same way as today, we're being filmed almost literally to show it to the next generation so that they can complain about our misbehavior today. That couldn't be possible if I wouldn't be doing it with machines. And you could say, okay, it's a simple camera. I write some script on the program. I have to switch screens. I'm a visual jockey. But it's still something incredibly powerful, I think. And I'm just very glad that some people on Earth advance these technologies to have that outcome that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
All right, that can get us started. Who wants to jump in with another word? Jared.
Yeah, piggybacking off of some of our last discussion, I think I'm deeply worried that these technological developments, so far as they are continually embedded within a capitalist profit structure, will just continue to get appropriated by profit motive to only to the ends of efficiency and extraction. And even though some of these technologies could have ecological sort of utility, I think unless there's this more fundamental structural change in the economic and governance side of things, I think that potentiality is going to continually be sort of overpowered by the sort of capitalist use of these tools. And so there's certainly currently a race to sort of implement and roll out the most advanced AI technologies between these major players as fast as possible. And there isn't very much sort of foresight or consideration of responsibility or social impact that these tools are already starting to seriously have. But that dynamic isn't going to be changed unless we can make some kind of fundamental alteration to the structure that is producing it. So I'm a little worried about going post-human or transhuman when I'm not entirely convinced that we've really become fully human yet in a sort of ecological mode. So maybe let's get that baseline set first before we start shooting for.
Okay, Corinne.
I'm gonna just add on to that. Thank you, Jared, and Oliver for being the ones to, start us off with. I don't like to always be the cynical one in the room. So I'm actually gonna reiterate some things and then maybe add a point for hope, which, I want to say that I'm pro technology, because as Jay was saying, we've always used tools. And we can use them for better or worse. And technology under capitalism is, I think, it's just disastrous. It's proved itself to be disastrous. And we're all the fears around AI and all of that. Under capitalism, it's likely going to be bad. But under socialism, technology and digital technology, cybernetics, things like that can actually help us transform our society into a socialist ecological civilization. And there's a really great book that came out a couple of years ago called The People's Republic of Walmart. And it talks about how the software infrastructure that major corporations that like Walmart and Amazon use, the way they've planned their flow of product and commerce, that's all a technology that actually would lend itself to a centrally planned economy under socialism. If we were to seize that technology, we would actually be quite successful at centrally planning ourselves on a large scale. So to realize that there are some technologies in place, they're just being used for completely wrong things. Hopefully that brings some people some hope.
All right, one more comment on digitality in general, and then we'll turn to another question, which I will dedicate to Andrew Schwartz. But
I agree with everything that's been said. I think there's obviously a lot of concerns and problems with the use of technology in the modern day world, but it's a challenge and an opportunity. That there's also a lot of good that can come from responsible use of technology. And so again, it comes back to having a system with the right checks and balances in place. You need some kind of controlled capitalist environment whereby there's the right regulation, the right laws in place to ensure that you can still extract the good from this tool without sort of creating other ethical dilemmas and things.
So here's the next question, and Oliver, just a word to you. Ilia Delio she uses the term transhuman, but she says, but what I really mean is ultrahuman. And so she thinks that technologies can play a constructive role in human life and make us not less human, but actually more human, for whatever it's worth. Okay, I dedicate the next question to Andrew Schwartz. Yesterday in a discussion, and Andrew, if I misrepresent you, I want you to jump in and say it right. But he raised the question, people interested in ecological civilization, a lot of us talk about creative localization or glocalization, and that is being part of your local community and doing something constructive that's in the interests of ecological civilization. And then other people talk about the need for global systemic change. What's really needed is global systemic change, not merely constructive local action. And then most people, when they hear that dichotomy, they say both local action and global systemic change. And so hence the term glocalization. Andrew really raised the question yesterday, and he can pose it better than I can, I think, but are you simply both, or do you prioritize one over the other? What do you make of this divide between localization and a globalized solution? Andrew, you want to put it in your way as well? Why don't you?
I like the way you put it. I think what I wrestle with is part of it's a tactical question, right? And it's a lot of what is already being discussed here is, we're not starting from zero. So if we have a capitalist economy, if that's our starting point, like how do we go about transforming it? You just throw it out or try to work with it, right? And I think a similar kind of tone for me comes up when we're talking about how change happens on a global scale. Is it simply just, if you have a lot of little local communities from the ground up sort of changing, and you add them all together, does that sort of equal to global transformation? Or does it need to happen at sort of this level of sweeping like international policy or the national federal level, and that sort of then has a broader net that then trickles down? And obviously it seems like both kind of levels of change are important, but I'm just tactically speaking and strategically speaking, like how does an ecological civilization emerge? How does deep transformation for ecological civilization occur?
Yeah,
that's where my head's at.
Well, I'm glad you added the word strategic, because everybody's going to say both and, but strategically, that was your emphasis. Yeah, Jared, go ahead. Jared.
Yeah, tying this into our previous discussion, I think there's a lot of opportunity for smaller, more local experiments to utilize information technologies to interlink more holistically, even despite large distances of space between them. And I think once we have a more networked, more kind of information practice sharing community of communities, this can help us circumvent some of the issues of existing systems, this web of sort of more ecological, but also more attuned to human well-being and sort of sustainable types of communities. What an attractor to create in this often sort of capitalist, alienated hellscape, unecological world destruction sort of paradigm we have. Like once those mesh together a lot more, people will go to those points, and some structures will develop and emerge more broadly.
Andrew, I take that to be confidence in the local, the collective local. I don't know, Jared, I don't know if that's right, but that's how I understand your response. Anybody else want to jump in? I think we're on the local global question and strategy. Anybody else?
I really
have
want
something?
to listen to Céleste because he has a background in physics, and system thinking is a lot about this, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, Céleste, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I'll say both, but in a very particular way. So I want to make sure I'm not just doing the cop out. So of course, people organize themselves at different levels of organization, right? There's the self. The self is an organization of your various organs, which of course are organizations of tissues and proteins and cells and all these things all the way down. And then we as people, we organize ourselves into local communities and then larger communities like, you know, counties and states and nation states and intranational organizations, and then even beyond that now. And so I would say when we're talking about organization, it's always at what level. Everything is organization. It's organization of organization of organization of organization. It's what usually is termed not a hierarchy, but a holarchy. It's everything is as itself a whole, but it's every whole is part of some larger system, and then it's composed of smaller systems. And so I think it's very, very necessary for every person in whatever ability they have to make whatever change that they can at whatever level of organization that they are currently a part of. So whether that's on a local community level or whether you're part of sort of larger international groups of people, everyone needs to be doing whatever they can. And again, we have until 2030, basically, if we want to have any hope of saving biosphere. So this is not just a theoretical question. This is the most immediate practical question of all of our entire lives, right? As I think we all agree on. And so I would say it's the more examples of success that we have, even at a very local level, even just at personal level, the more that we can have ideas of success, the more models there are then for larger groups of people having these successes then promulgate not just to small communities, but then eventually to national and really international levels of organization. One side effect of this is that really the nation state I think has really sort of outlived its usefulness. It's a level of organization, but it's really, we need to all be working together as a planetary body at this point, beyond the level of the nation state, to have the hope of solving any of these problems. But of course, coordinating 8 billion people together all at once is very hard, which is why we break ourselves into smaller and smaller groups, but the groups have to be coordinated. And so there's this idea in physics of phase transition. So if you have, say, if you're cooling down some water, the water at, say, 0 degrees doesn't immediately become ice. It takes a little bit of extra kick, and it happens just in a few places of nucleation. And just even a few places of nucleation eventually become this whole thing where the whole piece of ice freezes, and that happens very, very quickly. But it takes energy, and it takes not everyone necessarily doing it, but even just you may have heard of this in revolutions, and you can think about a revolution as a phase transition in a society. You only need a few % of the people, and once a few % of the people are actually getting towards this more holistic vision, I think it can then snowball into being the national and international change that we really need. But it takes a lot of people working at the local level and getting solutions going at the local level, and then eventually those, if we can do those at the right pressure points, right? You don't have to do everything everywhere all at once, but if there's just the right locations and the right points of pressure at the right locations, then these things can snowball, and we can have massive change that we really need. But that requires everyone working at their local levels in whatever way they can, and whatever your niche is. And that's what hopefully that we're inspiring today.
We have about 10 minutes. And so I want to give all the panelists a chance to say, here's the question I really wish you'd asked that you didn't, and I hope somebody talks about it somewhere. And also I'd like to give folks among us a chance to please raise questions in chat, and we can feed them to the panelists as well in the time that we have remaining. So while people may put some questions in chat, we'll see. Corinne, Celeste, Raj, Oliver, Jared, was there a question you wished that you'd been asked or we'd been asked? Then we addressed all the questions. This is correct.
one that I think is interesting is that a lot of sort of the ecological mood currently has this very sort of apocalyptarian, very sort of heavy feeling to it. Like the sort of prevailing sentiment is we need to start making a lot of sacrifices to move towards ecological civilization. We need to cut back on all these emissions, and well, maybe it's going to be hard. Maybe a lot of comforts in life are going to sort of disappear to successfully make this transition. My question of interest is, are there ways of moving in this direction that actually increase well-being, increase connectedness, increase sense of autonomy and sort of individuality, rather than taking us the other direction, which seems to be the sort of implicit assumption here?
That's a great question. Anybody want to respond?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Jared. And from my perspective, again, it comes back to finding integrated business solutions that sort of win on different fronts. You know, they make sense from a business perspective, but equally, for example, the environmental impact is right, or they reduce emissions. And so maybe just on a very small scale, one sort of compelling example that I came across recently, very specific to healthcare, is so it's around essentially distribution of like medicines in remote locations around Africa. And there's a company called Zipline which recently started using drones to basically reach people that need blood products very urgently in remote locations. And what they found is, obviously from an access perspective, health outcomes and everything increased, but at the same time, environmentally emissions were much lower because people could use drones instead of having to drive cars to reach specific patients and things, but equally in terms of waste and stuff, and as opposed to having like really big storage facilities where you have to have fridges where you're storing blood products and things, and there's wastage and stuff, there was like a lot more efficiency in the system, basically. So on a very small scale, that's an example of sort of an operating model which wins on a couple fronts. And so I think ultimately in different ecosystems across different business practices and different industries, we need to find more of those kinds of examples where you're not just doing it for the sake of reducing emissions because you're being pressured to or because there's rules to. You need to sort of find integrated solutions where it makes sense for multiple reasons.
Andrew, anybody else, a question you think you really wish we'd asked? I think Jared's was great, actually, and Raj, your response. And Andrew had a question he raised, and there's been a good discussion in chat. A response to Andrew. Andrew, can you articulate it succinctly, and we can consider those responses?
My response to Celeste's comments, that one?
Yeah.
Well, it just seemed like the more I was listening to our wonderful panelist here is that if we think about the sort of character of an ecological civilization, right, its core values, its structure, like what it looks like, and if that sort of end goal, has a certain character that's perhaps bottom up or decentralized or localized or those sorts of things, right, then maybe the means to that end should reflect the same values and that same character. And that it's if you try to, I think this is always something I struggle with sort of strategy questions. It's like, well, do you fight fire with fire? Well, if you're trying to build something out of ice, then that actually ends up undermining the very purpose of what you're trying to do, and you end up melting your foundations. And like, it's a weird analogy, I don't know, I just came up with it, but I think you get what I'm trying to say, right? Like maybe the seed of creating an ecological civilization is actually in the sort of method for how we go about building one, and that those values start sort of at the strategies for how we go about building one. So if we want to realize a more equitable and sustainable way of being, and that way of being has a certain sort of design and structure to it, then those designs and structures should be what lead us forward toward that mode of being, which may look like a very different sort of way of changing systems than what has been done in the past, which perhaps was more centralized, a concentration of power and decision making around like a single charismatic leader or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. I want to jump on that. I think it's really interesting because we also link it to the systemic perspective from before. So how do you establish systems that are effective to promote ecological civilization? I think with sustainability, there is a lot of people who think you need a sustainability pillar, you need the people who push everyone to do sustainability. But from my perspective, there's really one thing I learned in my career in sustainability is that it's not true. You're not going to have a separate pillar of sustainability. That is not going to work. You need to talk to the people who are dealing with the real problems, the engineers, the businessman, the scientists who are already in their domain and who want to grow, to evolve, literally, with the sustainability thing. So I think the seed is a very good analogy. And I would see sustainability not like as a pillar, but as a bag of seeds that you need to basically put in every little bubble that everyone has, where the seed comes from within, and that will actually make a tree that maybe connects all of the trees, if I want to finish the analogy. So maybe to inspire the youth, because that's why we're here. It's do not think of yourself as like a separate being who needs to push, who needs to always shout louder as the people, who needs to bring the doomerism numbers. No, you're here to really talk with the people and to try to understand from their perspective, how do they do it pragmatically, effectively, and also with the time constraint that we have.
We need to bring this to a close. We've got some great metaphors here at the end. One is the phase transition. Thank you, Celeste. And one is the seed planting. Thank you, Oliver. May we all be seed planters, and we're all indebted to at least one person among us who planted a whole lot of seeds, and that's John Cobb. And so I'd like to give John a chance to respond to this panel. In any way you'd like, John, we want to hear from you, whatever you say. But we want you to unmute.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me just say it's really interesting to hear you. My own sense, I'm afraid, is a little bit more pessimistic. And yet at the same time, in the pessimism, there may also be some hope. I think that I'm surprised that people don't seem to be more interested in changing our school system, because our school system has an enormous effect on how we think. Our school system is almost entirely modernist. I don't mean that you can't find individual schools that do individual postmodern good things, but the system, it reinforces all the things that we don't want, and it can be changed. So that's just a comment. I've been rather surprised that almost nobody seems to think that should be the focus of making changes. I just encourage you to think about that. I also think that a lot of our present systems are going to self-destruct. And therefore, that thinking about how to reconstruct is a legitimate and valuable thing. If we just think about how to reform, the world may reform itself, but it might not reform itself in a positive way. So I hope there will be a lot of thinking about when the present transportation system collapses, how are we going to feed ourselves? And I think being able to feed ourselves locally is #1 issue in the whole world. It's going to be difficult. So if we focus on how we can deal with the collapse of an we have an unsustainable society. I think we all agree to that. Well, that if it's unsustainable, it won't be sustained. That's the very definition of the term. What do we do as it collapses? Do we keep trying to patch it up, or do we try to build something different? And I think a lot of thought about what that difference would be, and experimentation would be very valuable. Well, obviously I can punch the button and I'll get started on a long speech. I'll quit.
I mean, this is why I'm in education. I mean, and well, higher education is important, which is where I am at the moment. I think the point is that I think in general, higher education is probably too late. We need to build this into the entire educational curriculum from really from birth onwards. And
well, the entire educational system grew out of modernism. There's no question.
Yeah, and
modernism is unsustainable.
Exactly. And yeah, I think just like everything else, we need a revolution, not just in society generally, but especially in education, because education is the foundation of everything. And that's where we can have the chance to promulgate this holistic philosophy, which can be the guiding principle of organization for everything else, economics and everything else.
And I think we can promise there's going to be some real collapsing going on in the next decade.
Yeah, I put in the chat a few times that, right, the scientific consensus at this point from all of the work in climate science is that we have until 2030 to basically completely reorganize global civilization.
And we obviously won't, so we will collapse.
Yeah. And that's the point, right? So either we have a massive organization in 5 years, or we face collapse. And at the moment, it seems like we're moving towards collapse, and we need to be able to deal with both. I think that's your point, right?
The collapse will give an opportunity for creativity. And if your generation will really focus on how you're going to recreate, I mean, it's very difficult in the collapse situation, but that's what you have to do, is to rebuild.
Yeah.
How to do it.
And I mean, certain things should collapse, but hopefully the collapsing that happens will be just of the good things. But yeah, we need to be prepared for all eventualities, and everyone needs to do what they can at every level.
That's the correct answer.
We just need some trust and time, John.
Well, listen, thanks to everybody. Right before I came here, I was at the local farmers market, and it was quite festive. And the food, the crafts that you could buy were great, all locally produced.
Mm-hmm.
And there was lots of music. And you really sensed, and they're multi-generational, young and old, and multiracial. And it was fun. And Jared talks about soft landings. Where can we land softly before the collapse? Well, maybe there's some places in local communities already that are filled with the kind of vitality and life that we really all want. So thanks to you. Thanks to all the sponsors of this event. And I'll hand it back over to Andrew now. I think we've got some music coming down the pike.
Yes. Yeah. Speaking of farmers markets and music, right? So it's so fun to be able to, and this is actually thanks to Jay's influence, that we have been trying this year to incorporate more of the arts into our discussions. So closing each of our sessions out with a musical presentation. Dongwoo Lee, would you be willing to say a few words about the band that we're getting ready to listen to? I know they weren't there, so they're in Korea, so they're asleep right now. They will be joining us this evening, but yeah, do you want to introduce them before we watch this?
Oh yes, I'm glad to. So Jeonbum-sun and Yangban are a South Korean rock band formed in March in 2014. And interestingly, Yangban refers to, in Korean, refers to the ruling class of the Joseon dynasty, started in 550 years ago. The band consists of leader Jeonbum-sun and the guitarist Lee Sang-kyu and bassist Park Chun-wook and drummer Kim Bo-jung. Jeonbum-sun and Yangban are labeled as a Joseon rock, so the Joseon style rock, and present a very unique sound that combines traditional Korean music with Western rock style. In 2017, they won the award of the best rock song at the Korean Popular Music Award. So combining their love of rock with a song at the Korean, with their passion for the Korean traditional music, and Jeonbum-sun and Yangban are a band that is making a great waves in the Korean rock music scene right now, and presenting authentic music based on Korean tradition. And Jeonbum-sun, the band leader and the vocalist, studied history at Dartmouth University in the United States and also the Oxford University in the United Kingdom. He is a highly anticipated artist in the Korean music scene, an activist, and also as an author of several books related to ecological justice. As Andrew mentioned, unfortunately, due to the time zone difference, he cannot join this morning, but he is going to participate in our forum in the evening session, and we'll talk about his music. I will share his homepage address in the chat box, and thank you. Please enjoy.
높은 데서 낮은 데로 좁은 데서 넓은 데로 얕은 데서 깊은 데로 막힌 데서 뚫린 데로 흘러간다. 높은 데서 낮은 데로 좁은 데서 넓은 데로 흘러간다. 계곡물이 흘러간다. 굽이 얕은 데서 깊은 데로 막힌 데서 뚫린 대로 흘러간다 계곡물이 흘러간다 굽이 흘러간다 우리들이 흘러간다 계속해서 흘러간다 우리들이 흘러간다
Fantastic. Thank you. Do you have a link for that song?
We actually, I could put that link in the chat. Dongwu might be able to do that faster. And then we'll actually have it on our website too. So you can always visit that later. All the recordings from our sessions have been going up on our website. So if you missed something over the week and you want to take a look, please do. So that concludes the first half of our morning session. We're going to take a 15-minute break and come back at 11 a.m. Pacific time for continuing the conversation, going a little deeper and hearing more from the rest of our audience. So thank you.